Hey everybody, I'm Jesse Laval. Welcome back to Photon Photography. Today I'm going to be making a video about what it's been like to shoot macro photography with the Canon R6. Now, it's exciting to get to make this video. I do love macro photography. It's the reason I originally got into photography in the first place. I started using a Rebel T6 and a 60mm macro lens. Fast forward to today, and I'm now using the Canon R6, the Canon 100mm f2.8L lens. Obviously that's adapted, so I do use the Canon EF to RF adapter with the control ring. I also use the Godox TT685C flash, the Godox X1 Pro trigger, and I tie all of the accessories on there with the small rig cage. Now, first and foremost, I do consider myself a macro photographer. It's my favorite genre. It's what I do the most of. It's what I've been doing for the longest. It's where my passion really exists when it comes to stills photography. I love making videos, and I've kind of fallen out of stills photography and gotten a lot more into video production, but my love for macro photography still will always remain there. I love peering into that microscopic world that largely goes ignored otherwise. I love the fact that you can see so much detail, and I love the sharpness that macro lenses provide. Sometimes I will use something like Kenko extension tubes, so that way you can go past the 1:1 magnification ratio, in which case your depth of field is going to be sliced down so thin that you almost need to start using focus stacking. If you guys are interested in focus stacking, think about checking out this video. I show you how to do it, what it is, and why you would want to use it. But in essence, it's basically to increase your depth of field because of that limiting factor of being so close into your subject that it's going to slice that depth of field down to almost nothing. And that happens even more so when you go past a 1:1 magnification ratio and start going into that extremely close magnification ratios when you use an extension tube to increase the distance between the back of your lens and your sensor. So the technical term of shooting macro photography would be shooting a 1:1 magnification ratio. I don't get too hung up on that. As long as it's close up, I'm pretty happy. I don't care if it's close to 1:1. I don't care if it's something that maybe I slapped on my Kenko extension tubes and now I'm shooting past a 1:1 magnification ratio. I kind of lump it all into macro. Some people call it micro, extreme macro. Some people won't consider it macro photography if it's not reaching that 1:1 magnification ratio. That's pretty strict. I mean, as long as it's close, I consider it macro. I do feel that my macro shots are by far my most dramatic shots. They're what I've practiced the most. I just really am excited to get to actually share these with you guys a little bit. So I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoy taking them. So my favorite subject to shoot macro photography with is definitely photographing bees. I love photographing bees, flowers, things like that. Every once in a while I do get the occasional praying mantis that shows up. And then even more rare, I get a shot like this. This is probably one of the craziest macro shots that I've ever gotten. I'll probably never get a shot like this again. I couldn't even believe that it happened right in front of me. It was insane, but I did actually get to take the shot. And I do love my bees, so I felt a little bad when it happened, but nature can be brutal. Now, the Canon R6 incorporated a couple of distinct advantages that have been really helpful when it comes to macro shots. One being the fact that the autofocus system is so awesome. I mean, I'm actually able to rely on the eye tracking of animals, and it's actually grabbed the eye of bees in flight for me. And I think that that's just crazy amazing because a lot of my other cameras, the autofocus just wasn't reliable at all. Now, I shot with the Canon T6, M50, and RP before I got the R6. Pretty much exclusively shot in manual focus with those. And I do still shoot a lot of manual focus images with the R6, but a lot of times I feel like I can rely on the autofocus system, which is just a huge advantage. The other big advantage is the fact that the sensor is just so good at high ISO values, so you can shoot with natural light, and you might not be so reliant on an actual flash, even though I do recommend that you use a flash for macro photography. I think when I did introduce flash into my macro photography just exponentially got better. So I do recommend that you use a flash. I'm not saying that it's the only way to shoot macro. I do think that in certain scenarios, it definitely can be a limiting factor if you choose to only shoot natural light. But the R6 is very good at high ISO values, so it will help you if you choose to do that. The other really good thing about the sensor from the R6 is that you can recover shadow detail without adding really any any tangible noise to it. So that's two things from the Canon R sensor that really do help when it comes to macro photography. The other really big addition to the Canon R6 from the other camera bodies that I had before was that this has internal stabilization. Now, I do use the EF version of the Canon 100mm f2.8L lens, not the RF version, but I do find that the IBIS still works perfectly mixed with the EF version. So adapting the EF lens still works very, very well with the internal stabilization. I still find that it helps my macro photography, even though obviously the returns from IBIS are diminished when you're shooting at something really, really close like that. It still definitely helps just that little bit. So those three factors, the really fast autofocus system, the really good R6 sensor, and the fact that you have internal stabilization built into the R6, those three things really distinctly helped my macro photography. Even using the EF 100mm f2.8L lens adapted onto the R6, no degradation to the performance of autofocus or stabilization. So I find it to just be a killer combo. I do use the small rig cage to kind of tie all of my accessories onto it. I'm using the Godox TT685C flash, being triggered by the Godox X1 Pro trigger. This was kind of a fun video for me to get to make. I was excited to get to show you some of my macro work. I don't get to do a lot of videos about macro photography on this channel, but I am hoping to have more going forward because, like I said, it is my favorite genre of photography. So I hope to make more videos in the future. If this did help you, do think about going below, subscribing, clicking that notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video.